Hello everybody, I want to welcome you to the plant walk section of today's class. We're here at the Ty Preston Memorial Library located on the east side of Canyon Lake, just down from the dam if you ever choose to come out here and have the real tour as such. I'm Susan Bogle. I've been involved here at the library since this building first opened and even prior to that. I'm a member of the Lindheimer Chapter of the Texas Master Naturalists, and most importantly, a member of the Lindheimer Chapter of the Native Plant Society of Texas. So today, as we're going through our tour, we just have a limited time. So what we're going to do is address this by sections on the property, to kind of make a concise approach to this, but within each section we'll be looking at the plants in numerical order as you find them on your list. Now you might ask why we're here at the Ty Preston Library, and that's because out of the 45 plants on your list, only 7 of them are not here at the library, and some of that is because they just flat out can't grow here because of habitat. So what we're going to do is, as we go through these sections, we'll go through about 10, maybe 15 plants, and then we'll pause and we'll have questions at that point in time, and that will be a live section of today's tour. We'll go live at that point. So as we go through, we'll be looking at the actual plants. I do want you to know we're coming out of a drought last summer, a heavy freeze this winter, some windstorms, and we've already done our major spring pruning. So the plants aren't quite back to where they need to be, but we have what we have, and I think hopefully you'll be amazed to see how they've recovered in this short period of time, especially since we've had such cool evenings this spring. So as we go through, I'll be probably repeating some of what you've already heard, but also adding some anecdotal information and maybe a few insights that weren't covered previously. So I think at this point we'd like to go ahead and get started. If everybody will look at number 18 on their list, this is the Red Yucca. You can see it's a typical yucca. If you look at those leaves, I will let you know they are the most harmless of the yuccas. They don't do a lot of damage. But in particular, look at those long stems that have the flowers on them, particular favorites of hummingbirds, but also favorites of deer. And let me point this out right here. This one's been nipped, even though this is well within our parking area. A deer has nipped the top out of that. It's one of the favorites of deer, but they're not eating the leaves, just the flowers. Very drought resistant, and it just gives an interesting form and structure in your garden. Item number 2 on your list is the Cedar Elm. That's what you're looking at right here. Yes, behind a fence, because it is predated by the deer. It is an evergreen. It does not lose, it's deciduous. It does lose its leaves in the fall after they have turned a nice shade of yellow. So when you hear there's no color in the hill country in the fall, this is one of those plants that will give you some yellow. Just as an aside, the flame leaf sumac will also give you color, and that'll be red. But you can see in looking at the leaves, they're serrated around the edge, and they are a little bit longer. This one, as a perspective, is probably about waist high, and it's been in the ground. It was planted quite small, and it's been in the ground probably 3 years now. Very little care is entailed. Matter of fact, we sort of forget about it way here at the back of the library property. All right, we're on the hilltop now, which is the area just beyond the parking lot here at the library, and we're looking at item number 15, the Evergreen Sumac. Just like its name implies, it is not deciduous. It keeps its leaves year-round. I will tell you that it is anything from a large shrub to a small tree, sun and partial shade. Just know that this one that you're looking at here, which is maybe knee-high, has been in the ground about 3 years. In my estimation, it is a slow grower, but you know, it all depends on location, location, location. What's your soil? What's your exposure? What's your moisture? Etc. This is on the perimeter of the property, so that means it gets almost no care. In the middle of the drought, we were watering it maybe every 2 weeks. Just to keep it going. So that's what you can say about it. When it blooms, it does have some wonderful cascading blooms. Okay, we've moved to another side of the building now, so we're starting that list over. And if you look at item 6, you'll see that this is a desert willow. You can see from the photograph, from the image you have there, that it's considered a medium-sized tree, but it does love full sun. You do not put this underneath other trees looking for canopy. You want it out in full sun. It is a wonderful tree. It needs practically no care. However, I do want to warn everybody, it has very brittle wood. Come a stiff windstorm, you're going to have limbs on the ground, some of them major. Also, the other thing is it always is dropping leaves, and also its flowers. So it's a bit of a messy tree, so don't plant it around your pool. Have it perhaps more on the perimeter of your property. But it is a wonderful tree from the standpoint it's totally drought resistant, and the beauty of it is blooming all summer long. Of course, like everything, the blooms are in cycles, so don't expect it to have flowers on it continually. It'll cycle through, but as it does receive some rain, you will be seeing the flowers return. And just know that to get a true color of the flower, buy it when it's blooming, because it does vary. They run from pink to a darker purple is what I've seen. If you look at item 9 on your list, you'll see the Texas Mountain Laurel, another one of my very favorite plants. In the springtime, it puts on a purple flower that I swear it smells like grape Kool-Aid. It's just absolutely wonderful fragrance that it gives out. However, this year we didn't have any flowers because of that late snowfall that we received. You can see the beautiful leaves that it does have on there. It is not typically deciduous. This year quite a few of them lost a lot of the leaves because of the burn from the snow that we received. But the majority of them are recovering, as you'll find with most Texas natives. They can tolerate a lot. It looks exactly like this on into the summer, doesn't need much water. Very few pests bother it at all. If they do happen to there's a particular caterpillar that can get on it, just let them eat away. When they leave, when the caterpillar leaves, those leaves they ate will return. And it's a good staple in your landscaping. It also provides a lot of nice cover if you're trying to blind out a certain unsightly item perhaps on your perimeter and you need a blind. This is an excellent choice. Again, one of my favorites, but I think you're going to hear that throughout this presentation, that's one of my favorites. They're a Texas native. Now if you look at item 13, the Cenizo, also called the Texas Sage, you can see it's got a slightly different coloration. It's more gray in color, and the leaf is not as hard and shiny as others, a little bit on the fuzzy side. The beauty of this plant is every time it rains, it will be covered in lavender to purple blooms. Absolutely wonderful, really nice fragrance also. Again, whenever you're planting plants, be sure to always plant for their mature size. You might notice this one's been severely pruned, and that's because it's right next to a parking spot here at the library, and I'm afraid the car takes precedence over the plant, so we have to trim it back. Just so that you know, it's also called the Barometer Plant because legend has it that when it blooms, it means it's going to rain. My experience has been it blooms after it rains. And here we have item number 14, the Esperanza, or also yellow bells. You can see that it is recovering from a very severe pruning. Many years you do have to cut it totally back to the ground. It will not, depending on your exposure, you might get blooms early on, but what I normally see is the blooms don't appear until we have hotter days and hotter evenings. It tends to grow to about chest high depending on your variety. And once again, it's a real favorite of butterflies and hummingbirds because of the deep throat of its flowers. If you look at item 32 now, this is Zex Mania. It's a staple here in the hill country. You actually see it growing wild in the fields, etc. You'll notice it in summertime when it puts on its small yellow blooms. It's the host plant for one of our local butterflies. They'll literally eat it to the bare stem, but don't worry about that. It will recover as soon as they move on. It can be a little bit aggressive. Once again, we planted maybe 1 or 2 plants here, and now we actually dig them up and share them as much as we can. Needs no care whatsoever. Sometimes we even forget to water them. Once they're watered, as many natives, they will recover. And here's number 45 on your list, the very last one on the list, but not in my heart. This is the Lindheimer Muhly, a wonderful grass. You're seeing it right now. It was trimmed in February, had snowfall on it, and here we are in April, and you can already see the regrowth that is happening. You do not have to trim it like that every year. It's your own personal preference. But I have noticed that it tends to recover and look fuller and more green when we have trimmed it back. It puts out these long stalks that on the top of them is the inflorescence looks like a plume, and it's just absolutely beautiful once it seeds out in the wind, and with the grass flowing and the plume waving, gives wonderful color and texture in your yard. Do know it gets about chest high. These two are too close together. Just one plant was installed. It does spread, as you can see. But you do need a little more room than what these exhibit. Okay, we've moved locations and now we're at the back of the library building. So we're looking at a Chinkapin Oak here, and that's item 3 on your list. It is considered a large tree. We have it here in full sun. As most oaks, it's not going to be a fast grower, but the slower they grow, the more sturdy they are, as you probably know. It does have a scaly bark as it matures. Ours here is probably 5 years old, and it's already beginning to scale up a little bit. Also, just so that you know, it is the host plant for a butterfly called the gray hairstreak, one of the most amazing little butterflies out there. I see a little bit of nibbling happening on the leaves here, so it might actually already be in its larval stage. Give special note to its leaves with the oaks, the leaf placement, and the perimeter, the design on the perimeter of the leaf, whether it's scalloped or ragged or serrated, will help you identify those particular oaks as you become familiar with them. And here's item number 8. It's a Possum Haw holly. Be sure to note there is no O in front of the word Possum Haw. It's not opossum, simply Possum Haw. It is a deciduous, large shrub, almost tree-like, multi-trunked, and its flowers are very innocuous. They're not noticeable at all, but I can already see some berries beginning to form. Just know this is the shrub you see on the side of the road in winter at Texas that is covered in red berries. And when the cedar waxwing come through, they're absolutely in love with this shrub. Now we have this one fenced because the deer tend to graze on it. They don't take it totally down, but they are a bit of a problem with it. And the thing to remember about the Texas deer, what they don't eat, they tear up. So if they don't eat it, then they're going to come back in the fall and try to rub the velvet off their antlers and tear it up that way. So a little bit of protection is always a good idea. Okay. Now we're looking at number 11, the Yaupon, an evergreen tall shrub, perhaps sometimes considered small tree. It does get quite large. You can see the smaller leaves, but this particular one perhaps isn't the best example because it was only transplanted about a week and a half ago. But you can see that it had bloomed quite profusely, and we've got some nice seeds beginning to form. In the fall, those seeds will turn a bright red and really nice color. out in the field. A lot of people will even use the Yaupon for Christmas decorations because of those red berries. Of course, the wildlife would prefer that you leave the berries on the plant so that they can have a little something to snack on during the wintertime months. Once again, it's being a Texas native, it is this particular one is drought resistant and relatively bug resistant. It has very few pests and will not require a lot of watering, which is why we have put it more on the perimeter of our property because we're not able to take care of those plants the same way as those that are closer to the building. Here we are still on the back side of the library, and this is a native lantana. This is item number 17 on your list. Technically a low-growing shrub, but I've seen them get as high as perhaps your upper thigh. The leaves are quite itchy, scratchy if you're working among them. The texture of the leaves tend to inflame a lot of people's skin, but look at those wonderful flowers. There's a lot of different lantanas out there, but the Texas native here is the orange and yellow, and I think the most beautiful. Lantana is one of the favorites of butterflies because it provides many ports for the nectar. Also, it gives a nice flat landing area. The lantana, again, is very drought resistant and will bloom as it does receive water. This one's growing next to our natural bridge, cedar bridge, rustic cedar bridge that we have here. We did not plant it, we do not take care of it, we do not water it. And look how lovely it is after a really long, hard winter. This here is item number 20. And please excuse the traffic noise in the background, but that's a south access road and nothing I can do about it. But number 20 is antelope horns. Everybody, I think, is quite familiar with them because they are a milkweed and obviously a staple in the life cycle of the monarch butterfly, along with queens and a few others. You can see this one is actually blooming, giving evidence to the fact not only is it a wonderful host plant for the iconic monarch butterfly, but it's also a great nectar source for a whole variety of butterflies and bees. You can see there's some bees on here right now, and we've already spotted. Right here is a juniper hair streak right there, and there was also a gray hair streak on here right there. I have seen as many as 16 butterflies on a single flower head of these. So sometimes it's overlooked what a great nectar source it is. It does grow wild. I feel that it's best transplanted by seed. I do it by seed. I don't personally have much luck with transplanting the plant. If you've got seedlings, you'll do better than you would if you dig it out of its natural environment, because it does have a very, very deep root system that is difficult to retrieve, and you probably will not have much, if any, success digging it in the wild. So I suggest instead harvesting the seed, but common practice is whenever you harvest seed, harvest only a third of the seed that's available, leaving 2/3 for the plant to reproduce in nature. Now we're looking at number 28, the mealy blue sage, another one of those plants that you see growing along the roadside, telling you what? Doesn't need much care, right? Hardly any bugs eat on it, doesn't need a lot of water, and then look at those blooms. With the least amount of moisture, those blooms will return even as you're looking at August and September heat. They get about waist high. We have them both in our butterfly garden and also here, just growing along the side of a pathway. We did not plant these. They showed up, they're volunteers, they're here on their own. We give them absolutely no care whatsoever, and honestly, I think they look better than the ones inside the butterfly garden. I think we might be loving those to death, perhaps. Again, mealy blue sage is a great attractor for all the pollinators, bees and butterflies. Matter of fact, while we were standing here, we saw a buckeye butterfly getting interested in taking advantage of some of the nectar. If you'll please look at number 36, you'll see that you're looking at now the Prairie Verbena. I do believe this spring is the year of the verbena. They must love snow because they have really come on. and I'm just seeing fields and fields of them. Right here, this is just growing in a native wild area. We did not seed any of these. Came up on their own. We do not water them. The plant itself gets about, calf high, but it's more of a ground cover type plant. You'll see it blooming, these purple blooms, all through the summer if you keep it watered. Mainly though, I'm seeing them in natural areas, and so the bloom comes and goes with the rain. It's a great attractor for butterflies in particular because it gives that nice flat surface for them to land on. The Prairie Verbena itself, I see preferably growing more in a natural area rather than a formal area, and it seems to like the worst soil around, so it's perfect out here at the library. As we were walking the trails here on the back side of the library, we had a sighting that was so unique, and you can see it right here. It is the rare and very unusual green metallic butterfly seat. Just wanted you to have a chance to see the expression on this butterfly and the fact that it does make into a nice little bench. We have two of them here, so you can come back here to the back of the library, sit here and enjoy the wonders of nature. Okay, now we have moved into the butterfly garden here at the Ty Preston Memorial Library, and we'll be staying here the rest of the time. The first one we're going to look at is item number 7, the Mexican plum. You see it in your image there. It's a nice understory tree, about mid-size. It's one of the first trees to bloom in the spring, usually early March. It puts on a beautiful flower that the fragrance is amazing. And this year, because we had such a dearth of nectar sources, the butterflies were covering up like crazy. It does generate the small plums, but very honestly, I think they're only edible by animals. I've tried them, and I will state again, I believe they're only edible by animals. But the creatures do enjoy them. In looking at those leaves, you can see they're slightly curled. That's not an indicator of lack of water. They're slightly curled all the time. It's just the way they grow. I almost overwatered this tree when we first planted it, thinking that it was wilting, but it was not. It is deciduous, so it's going to lose all those leaves come the fall, but you still have the nice structure of the tree itself. And very honestly, the bark on that tree is really quite interesting. That's something you need to remember in all your plants. They offer more than flowers and foliage. Now we're looking at the Texas Redbud, item number 10. Keep in mind, there's also the Oklahoma Redbud, but of course, being a Texas native, we're wanting you to be interested in the Texas Redbud. It's another one of the early blooming trees, blooming a little bit after the Mexican plum, puts on these beautiful red buds in about mid-March. Again, it's an understory tree, so it's about medium size, and it does prefer partial shade, but I've seen them in full sun also. You can see it can be a multi-trunk or a single trunk, and pay special attention to the leaves. They're just beautiful. They're heart-shaped, shiny, giving you good texture in the summer, and in the fall, sometimes you can actually get some color out of them. There are seed pods there, but I cannot say that we get a lot of volunteers of the redbud. I think you have to be a little more careful in planting those seeds. And here's item 12 on your list, the American Beautyberry, very aptly named. I just absolutely love this shrub. It prefers shade to partial shade, but I've also seen it in full sun. It is deciduous, losing its leaves in the fall, which gives you a great opportunity to get it trimmed back and get rid of all those crossing limbs, etc. And in the spring, it puts on a small, very innocuous flower, not very noticeable. But the wonderful thing is come late summer and early fall, those seeds will kind of round up a little bit and get quite shiny, and they turn a beautiful shade of purple. It is a beauty berry for sure. The animals absolutely love those berries, and just so that you know, they're also edible by humans. I have a friend who makes a nice little compote, spreads it on her pork chops, and she says it's wonderful. And here's number 16 on your list, the Flame Acanthus. This is a medium-sized shrub, very hardy. It is deciduous, generally losing its leaves most any winter. It puts on a wonderful red slim tubular flower that the hummingbirds and larger butterflies absolutely love. It responds to any form of moisture. I will say it's one of those plants in our garden that we almost forget about watering, so it's really quite drought tolerant. Now the shrub you're looking at here was severely pruned back to about a foot this last spring, and you can see how it has already recovered. It will end up being about chest high by the time we come into summer, and it's just a great plant to have on the perimeter of your garden because it does get so large that even if it's behind other plants, it'll still have a presence. We're looking at number 19 now, the Turks Cap. If you wonder where it got that name, it's because the flower looks like a turban. The petals fold into each other. It's got a real look of a turban. It is definitely an understory, shady, shade-loving plant. Lovely, soft, heart-shaped leaves to a certain extent, more palmate than heart-shaped. You can see the one here. This is the first time we've had to cut this back in probably 2 years. With this year's 9 degrees, we had to take out every bit of limb, and this is coming now from the base or the root stock. And again, this is just after a few months because this is April and the big snow was the first part of February. Again, this is a plant that if you happen to see the fruit, it is edible. And I've had many a breakfast off of this plant. I wouldn't call it delicious, but it is crunchy. Okay, we're on item number 21, the autumn sage, or also known as Salvia greggii. I don't use the botanical terms really that often, but Salvia greggii is such a famous plant that even I can remember that. So with your salvias, they are going to stay green all year. They put on traditionally a red flower, as you see here, a little bit of a deep throat. You'll actually see hummingbirds coming to this flower along with the larger butterflies, but also the smaller butterflies because that flower offers nectar to them also. On these, we trim them back within an inch of their life, really. I just have to comment that a monarch just landed on my head and then bounced off. So I just want to share that with you. Quite an exciting moment for me. But we cut it down to, maybe 4 inches, even a shrub this size, because that enables it to really bush out and recover from winter and allow us to get rid of the dead wood early in spring. The wood on this plant is particularly brittle, and as the shrub gets larger, it will tend to break off. It is also recommended that as the flowers mature that you deadhead them periodically. I've done it both ways. I don't know that one is better than the other. I've deadheaded, and then in the same respect I've also left them, and I've not noticed an absolutely huge difference. The autumn sages generally start out red, but they do morph over time, and the colors can change, going to pink, more of a lavender. And there is another greggii that actually does start out white. So be sure you're looking at your plant descriptions well when you're at the nursery. Okay, number 22 here is the Blackfoot daisy. And yeah, it makes you wonder why it's called Blackfoot, since it's a white flower with a yellow center. This again is a low-growing perennial. I will just warn you, Blackfoot daisy grows where it wants to grow. I have planted it many occasions only to have it later migrate to another location that it preferred, and the original plant has died. Just know that's sort of its way. Very drought tolerant, no bugs particularly eat on it, and it will flower with some watering pretty much through the summer as such. This is another plant that you see growing on the rocky hillsides around in the hill country. So it prefers its native soil. If you put it in a luxurious potting soil, it will probably die with that. And here's number 23, the butterfly weed. This too is a milkweed, just like we looked at the antelope horns earlier. Ergo, it's a host plant for not only the monarch butterfly, but also queens and a couple of others. It gets about knee high. It totally disappears in winter, just dies off to the ground, but don't give up on it. You'll see new little sprouts coming up as soon as it begins to warm up a little bit. Right now, the plant you're looking at is getting ready to bloom, but it just quite hasn't bloomed yet. But it's got beautiful flowers that come out in kind of an umbrella-shaped cluster. Do know it's very subject to aphids, as are most of the milkweeds, also the antelope horns. Very subject to aphids, which can really take the plant down. I don't use insecticides because that could affect what else might be hosting on that particular plant, but you can easily wash it off with a strong spray from your hose, or you can actually get in there with a little dishwater and wipe it down and then rinse it off. But very much a popular host plant for the monarch butterfly. Here's number 24, the Damianita, and if you saw something flutter away, that was a buckeye butterfly. He just might be back. But you can see the Damianita puts on these beautiful cascade of yellow flowers, which obviously the butterflies like. That tends to happen after a rainfall, even if you're looking at August. If we get a nice rainfall, it'll put on those flowers. Otherwise, it's a wonderful evergreen plant. When you brush against it, it's got a kind of a citrus, piney aroma to it. I find it refreshing. This is a plant that can be difficult to prune. Just prune out the die out and be careful in what you do. I've seen more than one successful gardener kill a Damianita because of excessive pruning. It tends to be low growing. Right now this one is probably about knee high, but you can probably see the other limbs that are laying down on the ground, and when they hit the soil they will put out more roots. Here we're looking at the fall aster. It's number 25 on your list, and once again well named. This shrub will bloom prolifically usually the very end of October, 1st of November, for about 2 weeks. You'll barely be able to see the green on this bush because it'll be covered in those blue blossoms. I will say it's not a huge butterfly attractor, but it really does put out the blossoms. The rest of the year, it looks pretty much as you see here. This year we had to cut it back severely because of the cold, but we cut it back to about 4 inches most year anyway, and let it recover as you see it's doing here. And as a matter of fact, we're going to cut it again in a week or so by about 1/3, because if we don't, it gets too tall, too leggy, and the limbs lay over, and we just want it to be a little bit more compact. But I will say it needs a little bit of water, but not a lot. We watch it a little bit as far as our watering schedule. But also almost no predation by any bugs, caterpillars, anything like that. So it's a good, reliable plant. It can be a little bit aggressive. We have taken out quite a bit here and shared it with those who are interested in it because it was taking over a little bit more property than we were willing to give it. And here we're looking at Greg's mist flower, or also called Greg's blue mist flower. It's number 26. If you're interested in butterflies, this is the plant that is recommended as the staple in your garden. You can see this is just returning from its root stock, but at its more mature growth, it's going to be about knee high, oftentimes leaning over on each other. It does tend to want a little bit more water than other plants, but it puts on this beautiful blue kind of a powder puff type flower, very, very small, and the butterflies absolutely love it, especially in the fall. So the great thing about the Greg's Blue Mist, it starts blooming early, it blooms all through the summer and until the frost kills it back. I recommend deadheading it through the year to encourage more flowers blooming. And just as an aside, the reason the butterflies like it so much, there's actually a chemical compound in the nectar that enables a better reproductive process for the butterflies. So they, through evolution, have discovered that this is really helpful to them. Ergo, this is one of their favorite flowers to come to, especially the queens and then also the monarchs as they're coming through. But I have seen almost every butterfly on this flower. We're looking at here number 27, a columbine called Hinckley's Columbine. It's a lovely plant, very delicate, moves beautifully in the wind, but pay special attention to that flower. It's one of the first plants to bloom in the spring, and it's such a reward because look at how complicated that flower is. You know, with the nectar source and then those limbs, almost limbs coming out behind it, giving it almost a look as though it's swooshing across there, like the Nike swoosh. They are very water demanding, so they will take more water going through the summer. The rest of the time we really don't worry about them too much. They do best in the shade, as you can see here, but they'll also tolerate partial shade. I've even seen them in direct sunlight. It does take a little bit of pruning to keep the leaf in that stem cleared out, because sometimes with the dieback that can become a bit unsightly and you have to get in there and trim a little bit. But it's definitely worth the reward to get to see those flowers. This is number 29 on your list, the Gara. It's just an absolutely wonderful drought-tolerant plant that is very surprising. The shrub itself, the plant itself, isn't too distinctive, putting on long stems with narrow leaves, but what's wonderful are those flowers it produces on the very tip, almost like small orchids. Again, very drought tolerant, doesn't need a lot of water. Matter of fact, I have found that if you water it too much, you have just about signed its death warrant, because it will die from too much water. It'll also put out additional flowers, but it's not known to spread excessively. We're looking at rock roses right here, number 30 on your list. Again, they were very severely trimmed this last spring, so they're just beginning to recover. You can see all the leaves on there, but we don't have a single flower to show you. Just know it's a wonderful little pink bloom with very flat petals, very beautiful pink, and anytime you water it, you're going to get more blooms steadily throughout the growing season, through summer on into fall. It's not a real favorite of the butterflies, but I do see them around. I will say that it is a little more water demanding than other plants. I think it's because the leaves are a little bit larger and they're flat, and they just seem to wilt a little more quickly than some of our other plants. They spread easily. We started out with just, I don't know, maybe 5 plants out here, and the rest came about because of the seeds. And the seeds are easily harvested if you want to spread it elsewhere. We're looking at number 31 here, the tropical sage, or the Salvia coccinea, and I'm saying that so that you have a clue on how to pronounce that word. I just love tropical sage. It is just so very rewarding throughout the summertime in particular, putting out long stems of red tubular flowers, more attractive to the butterflies than the hummingbirds as such. Doesn't need any particular care through the growing season except to keep it watered. It is a little bit more water demanding than some other plants, but it tells you right away. If it is wilted in the morning, you need to water it. Wilted in the afternoon isn't too meaningful, but wilted in the morning means it does need some water, but it'll respond within an hour once you put that water to it. It can get as tall as chest high. Just again, it depends on the surrounding environment. And it just provides a really nice focal point in the garden because of the plethora of flowers that it can have under the right conditions. We're going to talk next about firewheel, or also called Indian blanket. Right, it's number 33 on your list. Right now we have really nothing to show you here on the property, so you're going to be looking at some photos. Firewheel is an annual wildflower, easily spread by seed, totally ignored once you put the seed out and just wait for it to come up the next spring. What everybody says about April showers bring May flowers is not entirely true, because it's actually those October showers will bring you your May flowers, along with a little bit of help from the month of April. And you can see why they're called firewheel or Indian blanket. You can see the beautiful colors, and they last, probably easily 3 weeks, maybe a little bit longer even. And once again, you can harvest the seeds if you want to spread the plant. You really can't transplant it because it is an annual. This is horse mint that we're looking at now, again by photo, because there's nothing in the garden. It's a little too early for it to be showing up. Number 34 on your list. Horse mint is a really interesting flower structure. You can see it pops up like little pom-poms almost on top of each other, and it is a lovely lavender color. It tends to be a little bit taller, ergo it works well at the back of a planting or even in amongst some other shorter plants. Once again, easily spread by seed, and being an annual, should not be transplanted because you are wasting your energy. It will not survive the year. We're looking at number 35 now, the Greg's Dahlia. Use your imagination. This really got battered by that snow. It really got burned on top. We've already trimmed it back, but not enough. We need to take it down lower because it is definitely returning from the ground. You can see the leaves down there, very small, and they are a gray color, which gives you some relief from the constant green. It could be a nice little accent point, just knowing it is definitely a ground cover, but it's not a ground cover that can tolerate a lot of traffic, just something low growing. We have it in front near the pathway because it is low growing, and then that way it doesn't block the plants that are behind it. Normally you don't see this. I've never seen this happen before, so this is quite unusual due to that cold weather. It does put on a very small bloom that is not super noticeable, but it's a nice little surprise when you do walk out and find that the plant is totally covered. You just couldn't tell it until you got a little bit closer to it. Again, very drought tolerant. We water it maybe once a month in the middle of summer. Here's number 37, the Silver Ponyfoot, another low-growing ground cover. To be honest, this plant was only put in a couple of weeks ago, so it has not even been established yet. You can see it's got very light gray rounded leaves, ergo the name Silver Ponyfoot, and it will be putting out tendrils once it gets established. We've got 2 plants in there, hopefully with the intention of covering this area. Yet again, a ground cover, but it's not made to be walked on, more to be used in the garden where you need a low-growing plant. All right, we're looking at a crossvine here, number 40 on your list. Just realize that is one plant over there and growing up on that fence, and it's covering at least 25 feet across. So when you buy one, just know you're getting a lot of coverage. Normally, it's covered. I've never seen it look like this. It's normally full of these wonderful green, elongated leaves, a nice bright green, or I should say a deep green. It puts out an orange tubular flower first thing in spring. It's one of the first things to bloom. Believe it or not, even with the weather we've had and the fact that it decimated the leaves, that plant that you're looking at there was covered in blooms a couple of weeks ago. Now the blooms have faded, they've gone away, the butterflies are unhappy, and I'm not so happy because now we have nothing to look at because we only have what's left of the leaves. But the fact that we had the blooms tell me it did survive, and we just need to give it time to recover. But this is very abnormal to have it look like this. It's a wonderful vine that covers a lot of area, but is easily controlled. This is a Gulf Muhly you're looking at here, obviously getting ready to be planted. We've not had the opportunity to install it prior to this year, but we're really looking forward to it. It's number 43 on your list. I personally really do love grasses because they give a lot of interest to the garden, even without having the active flowers, and they all look just so wonderful whenever there's a breeze. Also, not a whole lot eats on any of your grasses. This Gulf Muhly in particular is going to put up an inflorescence that when the sun strikes it, it just turns just a beautiful purplish color. It really looks great late in the day with the sun coming through it from behind, being backlit. It does need a little bit more water, which is the reason we haven't had it until now, but I think I have found a spot where I think it's going to do really well. Okay, this is number 44, or Inland Sea Oats. You can see it is a grass, but it looks different from the grasses we've seen previously because of the shape of the leaf. It's much broader. It is a very aggressive grass, just so that you know. So when you buy some, just buy one. Soon you will have more than what you expected, and perhaps your neighbor too. Right now you just see the green of the leaves. Later on it's going to be putting on these wonderful inflorescence. That's the seed head, and the seeds are kind of look like oat seeds, and they arc and they sort of droop, and they look wonderful in the wind, and as the season goes by they turn brown, and as the wind blows them they almost rattle. So it's a wonderful plant, but I will just warn you, it is aggressive and will spread.